The CPC leadership candidates continue to campaign across the country. Will Pierre Poilievre win? What about Leslie Lewis or Jean Charest? To discuss the Conservative leadership race in a little more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, let's talk about some of the recent debates. We haven't chatted since the leadership debate in Edmonton, and we've had another one since then. What are your thoughts? Who came out on top?
Well, I didn't like the first debate in Ottawa because they were so angry and nasty towards each other. I think I mentioned that it would turn off voters. People checking in for the first time who were saying, "Well, I don't know about this Trudeau guy. Let me check out the Conservatives." You would run away from that going, "Holy cow, who are these people?" The one in Edmonton I thought was good. It was, Tom Clark kept them, some oddities in the format, like the sad trombone, if you mentioned someone. Paddles were a little weird, but Tom Clark kept them to the topic at hand. And the number one complaint I always hear from viewers and readers when it comes to debates is, how come you guys ask them about A and they answer with B? And he kept them on topic. So I like that. And the personal attacks, whether between Lewis and Poilievre or Poilievre and Charest, they weren't there. I want to hear about policy, and I want Conservatives to come together to beat Justin Trudeau. I don't want them to, damage each other so badly that it helps Trudeau and the Liberals in the next election. So I thought it was a much better debate format in terms of holding them to the topic at hand. And, I didn't mind some of the light stuff, like, hey, what have you been binge watching? Or what's the latest book? What music do you like? Kind of humanizes people. When I do long form interviews with politicians, I always love to throw in a question or two like that. Lets people know that the politician on stage, they're human as well. They eat, they sleep, they put their pants on one leg at a time.
It's funny you should mention that. We had the chance to interview Andrew Scheer at the Calgary Stampede. Open forum there. It was actually right on the midway. And I asked him what his favorite muscle car was. And I gave him the options of a Cuda, a Mustang, and a Camaro. And it was quite funny, his response. I think he went with a Mustang, the Fastback 428 Corporate Jet. Brian, let's circle back to the attacks for just a moment here. I mean, we see them all the time on social media. Pierre Poilievre taking shots at Jean Charest, calling him a liberal, Patrick Brown and Leslie Lewis. I mean, everybody's attacking everybody. That can't be really healthy for the party. And like you said, people are looking into this thinking, is this a kingdom divided against itself? How can it stand?
Well, it's going to be difficult if it keeps up, because you've got months to go, right? I mean, this keeps up until next September. Then what they've effectively done is whoever wins, and right now, let's face it, Poilievre's out in front, but if, could be somebody else, but they are writing the attack ads for the Liberals. The Liberals did this in after the 2006 election, and the Conservatives dined out on it for years. Stephen Harper had ads ready to go as soon as they picked a new leader. I worry that that's what is going to happen. And, as you said, a house divided against itself. I've already heard some people say that, people who are supporters of Pierre Poilievre, if anybody else wins, then they're leaving and they'll go to the People's Party of Canada or somewhere else. But I've also heard that, people like Jean Charest have to be forced out of the party. Why? You win by addition, not subtraction. If you want to have a purity test, well, then you're going to have a very small club.
And I think with voters as well, when they see all of the personal attacks going on, and it's like, yeah, I can't stand that guy. You're right, Poilievre. Jean Charest is terrible. And then let's say Poilievre wins, and then they're all buddies now. It's like, well, how much credibility is there in all of that? Like, was this all just a show? Like, what's going on here, right? So I think a lot of voters have issues with that. Now, one of the main key issues in the race, and one of the reasons Erin O'Toole was ousted, is where Conservatives stand on the carbon tax. Now, Brian, you and I have chatted about that in depth. You recently reported that Pierre Poilievre has run 3 times on a platform of bringing in a carbon tax?
Yeah, so what prompted me to write that was Poilievre saying, like, Jean Charest brought in cap and trade, and Patrick Brown proposed a carbon tax in Ontario. I'll fight them everywhere. And I thought, well, no, you've run multiple times. Now, I thought it was just twice. Turns out I went back through the old Conservative platforms, and it's 3 times. In 2004, his very first election when he won. In 2008, when the Conservatives won in the middle of the financial crisis, they ran on cap and trade. And in 2008, the Harper government's view was we should have a cap and trade system led by the provinces. that work with American states. And, it should be a North American wide cap and trade, putting a price on carbon. That was very important to them. It was in government documents. It was in their platform that Poilievre ran on. Well, guess who was Premier of Quebec in 2008 and did what the federal Conservatives wanted him to do? Jean Charest. He brought in a provincial cap and trade system and joined the Western carbon market with a bunch of US states and eventually Ontario and Nova Scotia. And I think at one point Manitoba was in. So, it's odd that he's attacking him on that when that used to be federal Conservative policy that he ran on twice. And then in 2021, of course, he's run on a carbon tax in an election. Patrick Brown never has, because he never got the chance to. He proposed it. So my point in writing the column, I've been accused of attacking Pierre Poilievre, is no, my point is, here's the truth. Here's where they've all stood in the past. Now let's have an honest discussion. Is this the right way to go? The wrong way to go? Should it be cap and trade? Should it be a carbon tax? Should it be nothing at all? Should it be a price on large emitters, which is what Andrew Scheer ran on and what Stephen Harper and the Harper government eventually moved towards? But just yelling, you supported this, you did that, it's not a good debate. It goes to more of what you and I were discussing earlier about turning people off.
With the fact that Pierre Poilievre is saying that he's against the carbon tax right now, is it just a matter of giving us what our itching ears are dying to hear?
No, I don't think that he would bring in a carbon tax if he were elected, either as a Conservative leader or Prime Minister. I think the party has moved on. Would he necessarily repeal the Trudeau carbon tax? It depends. I mean, Jean Charest is saying he will, but he's also saying he'll deal with carbon emissions in a different way, but not a tax on consumers. So, that's the type of thing that we need to hear. Okay, you say you're against the carbon tax. Are you going to repeal it? If you're going to repeal it, are you going to bring in something else? And if so, what's that something else? Don't just tell me I'll scrap this. Okay, but are you going to replace it with something that might be worse? I didn't think you could get worse than Justin Trudeau's carbon tax until I saw Aaron O'Toole's, where you got Aaron bucks. Depending on what you spent, you could earn points to buy a hemp purse or bamboo straws based on your government points. I never understood that. But so I want to hear what's next, not just what did you oppose before.
Brian, Ontario's election campaign continues. Do you think much has changed, or will the PCs under Doug Ford be re-elected come June 1st?
It was a very short election campaign period, just 30 days, Hal. There was the previous, campaigning going on, but the official campaign period is just 30 days. And we're 2 weeks in. We've had 2 debates and not much in the way of movement. One poll will say the PCs are down a little bit or the Liberals are up a little bit. The Liberals are still below 30% in most polls. They're fighting for second place with the NDP, and the Conservatives are consistently in majority territory. So Doug Ford is most likely going to, win back power. There are a couple of splinter parties from people who left the PC caucus that went on to form New Blue, as well as Ontario Party. Combined, they're polling at about 3%, 4%. And where they will be strongest, the PCs are also going to be strongest. So I don't see much change at the end of this election, unless something happens in the next 2 weeks. As I always say, my caveat until the day of voting is campaigns matter. But on that note, advance polls start on Thursday. And you've got 10 days of advance voting. Every single party is going to be pushing for advance voting so that the votes are locked in. That's why they like those, so that the votes are locked in and somebody can't change their mind if something happens in the last week of the campaign.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep our eye on that and what's happening here in Alberta with UCP Leadership Review. The results should be made known tomorrow. Brian, the unofficial border crossing Roxham Road is back in the news. Now, you recently wrote in the Toronto Sun about a huge increase in numbers and the claim by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that there's really no point in trying to stop the illegal border crossings there. Why not?
Well, he says, well, if we close Roxham Road, they'll just cross somewhere else. That's not true. We've got years of data on how many people were intercepted by the RCMP. That's what they're called. So they're listed as both asylum seekers and RCMP interceptions. And Roxham Road, of course, is that dead-end road. Used to be able to just drive from New York State into Quebec, no border checks. That was a long time ago. It's a dead-end road now. But people take a cab to the end of the road and then walk across the border into Canada. It used to be in the tens per year. Now it's 100 a day. And this all started in 2017 with that tweet Justin Trudeau put out trying to show that he was more caring than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was going to tell people who had been in Haiti from Haiti, who had been in the States for years, to go home, just like Canada had done years before under Trudeau. He put out this tweet saying, "Welcome to Canada. We, welcome everyone." All of a sudden, you've got this influx of people, and they're not refugees from the United States, and they shouldn't be refugees to Canada, because by the time they get to us, they're in a safe third country. Right? Instead, we've got people flying in from Nigeria, Pakistan, and other countries where the majority of the cases are turned down. At best, it's a 41% approval rating. From places like Nigeria, it's 25% approval rating. But they fly into JFK Airport in New York City. They take a bus up to Plattsburgh, New York, and then there's a cab waiting for them to take them to the Canada-US border. We got rid of this during COVID, by the way. It disappeared in March 2020 when the COVID shutdowns happened. Now it's back to about 2,500 a month. There's been probably getting close to 10,000 so far. And the Premier of Quebec, Francois Legault, says, "Look, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't afford it." Because the province is required to provide housing, social assistance, enroll the kids in school. And the feds, it's their problem, and the province of Quebec is paying for it. Francois Legault said, "Please shut this down." And Trudeau said, "No, we can't do it. C'est la vie."
Isn't there also a danger of some extremists making their way into Canada? Like you said, from countries that are quite volatile and have, histories of extremism, making their way to the United States and they're just crossing the border?
There's that. There's the fact that, because of the rules in the US are different than Canada, there are going to be people who are coming in who aren't vaccinated. We don't let you in if you're not vaccinated. But, people crossing there, that's not a requirement that they have to face. So, if you've got a family member that lives in a foreign country and they're not vaccinated, they can't come and visit you. But if they cross at Roxham Road, declare themselves asylum seekers, they can. There are so many issues with this. There have been criminals caught over the past, 5 years at Roxham Road. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are more on the way. Like I said, there's about a 25 to 40% approval rating for people who are claiming refugee status. That is not very high. But if you bring that up to the government, they try and just say that you're against immigration or against refugees. That's not the case. This is just not how you run a system.
Brian, Canada's responsible gun owners have been angry about a potential gun registry. We got rid of a $2 billion fiasco a couple of years ago, and now there's something new coming in? Tell me a bit about that.
This is from legislation that was passed 2 years ago. I believe it was called Bill C-71. And I said at the time when I saw the text of the bill, I said, this will lead to a backdoor gun registry. The bill was one of these typical Trudeau gun control ones. They say they're going to deal with crime on the streets by regulating law-abiding gun owners. And so almost every measure within it was aimed at people who are already vetted by the RCMP, who've done their safety course, background checks, et cetera. It came up with things that already exist. Like if you're going to sell your gun, you have to ensure that the person you're selling it to in a private sale has a license. You're already required to do that. They've just codified it in a new way so that they can say, "See, we're making them do this." But if you're buying a gun from your local gun shop, then that gun shop now has to keep a register of all sales, and they've got to keep it for years. Now, most gun stores do keep some sort of register for themselves, so they can know that, okay, well, Hal came in, he bought this gun, you come in to get it fixed. They're keeping track of their inventory because they're under immense pressure and a lot of scrutiny. But now this is a formalized government requirement. The government says, well, you're going to, police will need a warrant to ask for this. It won't be abused. Nobody is believing the Trudeau Liberals on this. And the RCMP, just ask the people of High River, they've got a spotty record.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.